How much time do we have to?
Okay, I'll give you time. So the charrette comes from architecture, where architects would have a project that they are like individually working on, and then they get to a point where they're kind of stuck or they have a problem and they want feedback. And so typically, like, the idea is that they come to a group, a table, and they share their work, what they have, and sometimes it's pretty developed, and sometimes it's just kind of an idea or even an aspiration. And they'll share kind of what is the roadblock or roadblocks that's challenging them, and then it becomes kind of the group project for a brief period of time. So then the group discusses it. The presenters are not the dominant people during that time. They're going to be primarily listening for ideas, but they can participate, unlike other ones where they kind of step back and they don't say anything. So in this time, and that's important because we might hit on a topic but then get off track on a different topic, but the first topic was the one that was really important to them, and so, you know, then Kite could say, can you talk more about this? I really want to hear more about that. So they have the power to kind of guide the conversation. So in terms of time, the charrette will definitely end by 10 till, because I want to make sure that we have time to debrief, which will take whatever, 5 minutes. But it can end before that. So, and I won't end it before that. That's up to you guys. And so, if you get to a place where you feel like you've got enough, you are at saturation, or you feel like that's good, you can end it before you can just say that. I think we got what we need.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you guys? You guys all? Okay.
So what I'm going to do really fast before we explain what we're doing, and I'll probably let you explain what we're doing this time, is I'm putting resources. If you're like me, sometimes you would just send it once to look at something. I would say that these, when we did the last charrettes, that these might have been distracting. So don't take them unless you feel like you need to. So here are a couple different 6th grade number standards that we might be working with, math standards. 7th graders are similar, but we have a couple differences that Carmen will explain. So if you feel like you need to look at the math standards, those are there.
Can I go get the 7th grade ones really quick? No,
Yeah, I'm sorry. These here are how I unit plan, sort of. I mean, mine are like these big things, but thank you. But I don't think that it's important. Just so you guys know, this is front is Renaissance, which is the 6th, 7th grade unit. The back is the 6th grade Friday unit, which is Ancient Civilization Maya, and it's related in some ways to what we're doing. And then this is 6th grade math. So if you feel like you need to refer to one of those, I am going to give everybody this the science lesson plan, because we're kind of using the science as the anchor around which we're trying to build the other. We're kind of doing it based on this anchor. So this one's science. This is Ariana's kind of shell for her unit plan. And so we're trying to see how we're going to make it integrated STEM unit. 7th grade math really fast.
Well, I mean, we just did similar triangles, and then that unit continues to talk about, you know, there's a whole piece about similar triangles and the shadows and the angles and, you know, the finding the height of the tree by standing in the shadow. And I've always wanted to kind of do that as a like mini project with them. So the idea of kind of including that in this somewhere, either as a character or as, you know, like how are people thinking about these things, that piece of it. And then they always, I mean, a big piece of both 6th and 7th grade math is proportions, ratios, solving equations. Well, maybe not quite for 6th, but so that's a big piece of it. And then scale, there is a thing about scale, drawing and scale to scale. So that idea of modeling to scale. I think those are the main pieces that we wanted to cover. And percentages, that kind of, yeah, those pieces.
Modeling is huge. In 6th grade,
Right.
Ratios, rate, they're dealing with number lines.
Right.
These are connections that I thought might work. Conjunctions, you can see some of these, standard to metric, base 10, that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
they're also doing fractions to decimals and percentages, so conversions and generals. So
Right.
you guys can just keep that in mind when you're talking and giving advice. That would be really useful.
Okay.
Joanne, do we?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Ariana, you said that the first couple bullet points lent themselves a little easier, you think, to the kind of cross-pollinating. Did you want to focus on them, or were you just kind of thinking that it would be easier because you think they more naturally flow?
The model, and it wasn't the first 2 bullet points, right?
Yeah, it was so I thought that both the major constellations and then all the way down to the model. Yeah, so I guess the last 2 are the ones that I'm not that worried about covering on an interdisciplinary.
Oh, okay.
So really those first 4 bullets.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And so it is a preference of yours to kind of focus on those 2 bullets for the interdisciplinary
Yeah,
aspect?
and yeah. So this whole area up here, but if you see other.
Anyone else have questions?
Yeah, so when you talk about it, it's best to tackle in 2 units. The 2 units, if I'm getting it right, are one is like a modeling-based unit, and the other one's like a debate sort of unit. Are those the 2 projects kind of that are around that the 2 projects that are in the unit?
That's what we're
Yeah,
thinking.
Okay.
We weren't sure if we could put them together or not, so we're just kind of trying to figure out how they'll flesh out.
It sounds like a good way to do it, but it's also part of what we're asking you guys advice for.
So I think we can go ahead and talk, because this is a charrette, if you have a question, we can ask them, it's not like they can't be asked. And but let's try not to be too directive towards them, we're kind of sharing as a group now, about ideas.
Well, something that came to mind when the timeline was mentioned seems like a great idea. And then looking at these math standards, maybe a way to expand that is instead of just limiting it to a timeline, you could also do some kind of a time and space line. You could do some kind of like Google Mapsy or directions things that could include things like, you know, how long it would take to get from one place to another, kind of another way to conceptualize those distances and building that scale. So a timeline that also includes like space, directions, kind of that kind of 2-dimensional projection of that stuff.
I guess I'll jump in about the humanities. I don't have a whole, I think the modeling thing sounds fabulous. It's just definitely outside of my expertise. I don't have a whole lot to add on that. But the part about thinking about trying to get into the head of Leonardo da Vinci or Galileo or Copernicus, I think that has a huge amount of potential, and I think it could be tackled in all sorts of different ways. And just some of the things that I was thinking about as they were talking was so a multi-genre piece that could be done individually or as a group. So in a multi-genre piece, you might have, they might create a wanted post sign, or they might write the notes for an experiment, and they might have a fictional diary entry. So they are tackling the subject from all sorts of different genres. So that was one thought. And then the other thought I just had, which is and I don't know myself personally, the fleshed out story of these dudes thinking through this kind of stuff. And I'm guessing that there is really interesting stories there. That either the teacher could research and present to them, or the kids could research depending on where they want to go for that. But once they have that information, it's like, this is the kind of thing that I think would be cool as a movie. I would like to go to a movie about Galileo struggling and stuff like that. So another thought would be kids putting together either scenes from a movie or actually writing a script or something like that. So some sort of.
I don't know if this was something that would be helpful or feasible. Well, I think it'd be feasible, but what do you guys think about linking the 2 projects especially if they're doing something like a debate? With the modeling, it really lends itself to, like the bullet point about the relationship among common objects in the solar system. With Galileo and, all of them basically, that's what they were looking at, is the relationships to that was their data, you know what I mean? And so with these modeling things, you can have them, physically, in a sense, model what they're talking about, and then with the role-playing parts or the historical figures or something like that, they have to, so they're not modeling these things as students building models in school, they're modeling them as the historical figures who are making an argument for their scientific discovery or theory or something like that. And so they are two distinct projects, but the kids have to carry the theme through both of them. Doesn't it?
That makes me think of you have the model and you can have the dialogue among these characters, and maybe they're kind of antagonists, and then as a way to kind of bring them in, you could have the whatever the product is, the model, could have like fallen through time, and now they can re-argue the things they know with this thing the students produced, and they can refer to it. So now we found this thing from the future where they know this, you know, and they can justify themselves and use like their vernacular, and in their milieu they can present this information that the students need.
So the kids have, some of them, there's 6 and 7 graders, some of them have seen science fairs, and I wonder about what it would look like if there was a science fair done in the period, like, so that they had to do like their little teenage Copernicus, you know, doing a little experiment, and they have to, you know, present and dress and act like.
It would feel like a Renaissance fair, but it was science
Right,
projects.
exactly. It's like a,
You could have another group do the Earth-centric science fair.
That would be awesome. That's
And I mean, perhaps this goes without saying, but like for that to be the most educational, probably there would be some like instructional time spent on. So how exactly do we make this a period science fair and not just going based on people's like sort of media-based conceptions of like Renaissance fair, like costumes, woo, but like actually kind of studying like how can we do this authentically? Would bring in more of the humanities, but it's just gonna be a science fair.
I mean, and I always think about, like, I think about Renaissance time, like, you know, just, I mean, I'm always thinking of the political aspect, like, so who, you know, who's pushing the research, who's supporting the research, who's resisting the research, what are the kind of political fallout? And I don't know where exactly, but that's, I think, a really interesting and really important part of the time period.
Something some research just said triggered the whole part of this. It's the accountability and how you're assessing who's doing what. It'd be interesting to have a team of kids that were like the historically correct team, and they went around to judge whether this was truly staying in the at the time of the discovery of these things, and coming up with evidence of whether it was or not. It wouldn't seem like the normal assessment. It would seem like it was they could even wear costumes and even the historical police or something.
The Medicis, the first thing you know.
And I'm wondering about bringing in people, like community people, just thinking about that article that we read and about how that makes it when they're dealing with other adults.
Professionals who do that
Right.
too.
oh yeah.
So I wonder if there are people either in the science community that just take, you know, get a kick out of it, or, you know, like the creative, anachronistic people could come and, I mean, I wonder about reaching out and bringing in people.
So in this discussion, I've kind of lost track of what the 2 units were. Could someone reiterate that to me? Because it seems like they've bled into each other a little bit. So there's 2 that happen in sequence.
Well, they haven't really talked about it. Do you guys want to, Ariana, you did the initial thinking on that.
Well, I think that other people were, I probably just voiced it first. So it wasn't even necessarily 2 units, just 2 projects within this unit, and one would be more of a modeling project. In my mind, would it have been more of a modeling project because there are these certain phenomena which they should be able to develop and use a model to describe the role of gravity or explain the phases of the moon, or
And they could be
show
happening simultaneously, the
With-
modeling and the science.
Right, so there's the modeling one, and that one I felt lent itself really well to the math connection, and then this historical research one of how, of basically walking through the thought process, getting into the head of those scientific revolutionaries, and maybe using historically accurate research methods or getting into character for a debate or, so those were the
Or
two.
this intersection of the
or-
projects
Or
where you
this,
have
yeah, where then I guess there's separate prep that you always know that it's going to come together.
When you were talking about modeling, are you talking about it in terms of kind of astronomy, and so kind of astronomical modeling, or were you also thinking about things like, because when I think of Renaissance, I also think about architecture and invention.
I mean, that'd be great. The standards are specifically astronomical or cosmological standards. So that is what the next gen standards are asking.
I
but
think it's-
don't know what.
Like, I think one of the things, the challenges is like to kind of keep our scope narrow enough that it's manageable.
You can go deep.
Yeah, so I kind of have this conflict though, and I'd love to hear your ideas about it. There's all these different connections and all these other humanities things about the Renaissance that we really should be looking at. So how do we prioritize and keep the scope narrow enough to manage and do deep learning? I'm curious what you think actually about that.
And another thing I'd just like to throw out there is I struggle with how does everybody get all of the information?
Right.
You know, like, do you have different historians who are working on different models, but then how is everybody well versed in how the seasons work, for example? And I had something else, but I forgot it. So, how does everybody get all of the information?
So there's two kind of questions that they want us to know. So one is kind of issues of scope, kind of like breadth versus depth, and how, and particularly in humanities, how do you cover the other ones if you go deep in those ones? There's that. And then the other one has to do with how do they get the information. So let's talk about kites first, and then we'll go to Ariana's. So does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Is it scope?
This is the depth versus.
Well, it seems like it is pretty broad. I mean, I would say just from science teaching experience, like under the fourth bullet, that sub-bullet 3, with seasons and the hemispheres, that alone is a gigantic chunk, and kids struggle conceptually with that so much. So that, as a sub-part of all this other thing, if all those objectives want to stay in there, then I think it defines itself as fairly broad under those terms.
So you're saying it's a lot already, right?
Yeah.
As
Did
is.
you guys have a framework for time on this at all yet, or?
6 weeks, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
so this quarter, so
6 weeks, but
wrapped
then
up in
it's
Christmas.
multiple classes.
Right. Yeah, there's room for depth in that, but it is a lot.
Right, and
Right.
there's presentation week and getting things rolling, so I would, in my mind, I'd frame it more as a month,
Right.
just because we need to think about like how much
Like
time to really be
And
working.
a reflection period, I think that we talked about this after
Right.
Gateway last year, is having the presentation week hopefully not be the last week of school.
Right.
So then we can reflect after, even if that means we can't go as deep, I think that reflection is really crucial.
But I feel like the multiple classes is a key here too, because like I feel like I can look at this idea of building a model or making scale drawings of things, and I feel like that could be all of math class. Like I feel like you could do all this science, I mean not that you're not gonna wanna do, but that they can come into my class core 3 and we can just do scale, proportions, and I don't know, but I don't know if that's the same for, I don't know if that's too much, but I was thinking that part of it is so mathematical, so much of what our standards are.
Yeah, I think that the overlap will be really powerful, we'll help us, and especially having open classrooms, you know, more like stations that are going on or something, so that we're really emulating what we're aiming for, which is to not have it be science class, which is to have it, we're doing astronomy Renaissance project this quarter.
And I guess to directly hit your thing with humanities, I guess what I would think about is depth is powerful, and you guys want it, and I think that's good to do, like decide what you want to focus on and have them go deep in that. And so thinking about UBD, that's your essential learning, and then there are other things that you might want to cover, and so like you want to do like a lesson on the Mona Lisa or something like that, and so you might even call it something like Renaissance exposure. And then you have like a little mini lesson, which is 15-20 minutes, they have some exposure to it and stuff like that, but that's kind of, and it will probably be a nice break from having to do this project, ongoing. So, I'm gonna have us turn to the other one, which was Ariana's question about how do the kids get the information? Like, what's the best way for them to get the information?
Yeah, well, and basically what I'm saying is if you have one kid who's Copernicus and one kid who's Da Vinci and then another kid who's doing the phases of the moon, how does Copernicus get the phases of the moon? You know, like how does everybody get everything on a deep level is what I always struggle with, and how do I organize that to help that happen, hopefully.
Right, and I think that's such an important question, because I think presentations is not gonna do it.
Right.
Presentations is more for, it's, the person presenting is getting presenting skills, and the other kids are getting some very, very basic exposure, and that's it. So it's not gonna be enough that they just listen to other people present.
Yes, I share this concern, so I'm curious. I mean, we think like jigsaw, but it has to be in a way that you're meaningful. You're working with the stuff in a very meaningful way, not just like, oh, I did this. Yeah, let's all put it on our part of the poster, and none of us know really what everybody else did. So they're all working with it. They have to all work with it somehow.
I really liked the debate idea for that reason, because I know I had a middle school experience where I had to debate a political viewpoint that was not my own, you know, and I feel like you learned a lot from having those kinds of back and forth with someone. And I don't know if that's going to cover it all, but at least having those, like the idea that they're competing almost, or they're having, but not, you know what I mean. But I just think that where you're saying, oh, but this is this, and why don't you understand it? And the other person's able to say, but I see these things this way because they've learned all there is to know about that person, that could work that way.
Though it was, and I completely agree with you, and I think that was the other question that had slipped my mind. So then you have some people who are debating scientifically inaccurate theories, right? And so I'm just.
No, that's a crucial point.
Then they're graded on how inaccurate, but how well can you be in character and defend that, which means that they have to learn the accurate ones to. Right.
So there's another way potential. Kai, did you want to
go
say?
ahead.
You sure?
I'm excited, but I got it. Go ahead.
Because another way to potentially do it is to do a trial, which is so like someone gets. I'm putting my theory on trial, and you have people on both teams trying to like defend and prosecute for that theory, and then you still have people though, like if I'm doing the scientific theory that Copernicus came up with, you still have people who are challenging that. So you still have people on the wrong side of things, but
if it on trial is something that is easy to defend, not just at that time, but if we can, so on trial something that's wrong, and all these people are using their different data and theories to argue why it's wrong, not putting on trial something that's correct, right? What if it was more that the wrong theory is on trial, where these people are like, no, but this, no, but that, no, but this, and they're arguing for the.
Then you can bring in all the factual evidence.
Right?
evidence.
More people can argue the factual
Because you're going to be arguing passionately to try to debunk that theory.
So
then
the
you have a
Either
panel of
way,
people who are saying, no, everything does revolve around the Earth, and then they have to bring forward their evidence to prove that actually it doesn't. And so we're looking which group has the most effective.
or you could just do it. This is how you could solve it. You could have different 3 different trials, and have the students all doing the real, the good science thing that they're putting on trial, and then you guys are acting as you guys are the ones that are cross-examining. You guys are the ones that are having them, where are the holes in the data. So you don't have to ever put a student in a situation where their whole thing is to.
Right, and so then and then we would say that. Not make it a competition among them, but that we know that they're all defending the same idea, but who has the most sound evidence, which group has the best model, which group has the most logical evidence.
They could be competing for a grant or something.
Yeah.
I mean, that's realistic.
Patronage.
Right,
Oh,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah, that's neat.
So I like
And they could have different
Get a
ideas.
bag of gold coins.
Yeah,
else?
seriously, go flip.
And that's
I'm
the,
really
and then that's
excited
the
about
whole
being the
who
patron.
supports, you know, like who's funding and who's pushing.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's really
Yes.
nice way that connects everybody.
I like that too a lot, because one of that does solve the problem that I was initially going to bring up is if you have kids arguing against kids, you have one group of kids who are doing all the research, and the other group of kids are kind of going into that subject blind, almost, it seems like, because they're going to be doing different things. And so I think I like your idea a heck of a lot better. But I was almost thinking of if they did it almost more of a proposal for an argument or something, where they present, and then, you know, the presentation is kind of at the very beginning of the class, or whatever the time period is, and then the rest of the groups, working as groups, has an allotted amount of time to go do their independent research on the proposal that has just been proposed to them. And then, so that is them, so then they come back to it, to yay it or nay it, or debate it, or whatever it is, but that way they are not just doing research for the sake of learning, which is a lot of times what it feels like, but they are researching so that they can comment on the proposal they just heard.
I think that I'm really excited, personally it's not my thing, but excited about the idea of the grant board. Like,
Yeah.
that is something that real people do, that real scientists have to do. They have to come up with a proposal, come up with their research plan, right? And they go in front of people, and I'm not exactly sure how that's true, but they present. And I think that we could find people in the community who've done that, who do that, and who could talk and kind of coach through that.
So
What if all the,
Okay,
Sorry.
so we're gonna have Ariana and then Santo and then Joe.
Well, I think that's a really good point. I was just gonna say I was really excited about the idea of being the patrons and coming in the week that it's costume week, and so the kids don't know, they think we're just dressed up as costumes, and then like we gather all of them and we're just wearing this ridiculous attire, and then we give them their projects and their assignments, and we're their patrons. But I think you're right that we need to ground it in the reality of there being a grant board, and that's
You can still figure out some way to
Yeah.
push those things.
I'm still trying to get my head around that question about how do we make sure that every child goes deep on all the things that we want them to be deep in, and not just something and then they hear other things cursorily or superficially. So I'm imagining whether it's a trial or a grant board presentation or whatever this thing is. Imagine this, where 5 minutes in, freeze, everybody stops, and whatever character then, and the facilitator comes in and goes, okay, you're stepping into this role, you're stepping into this role, okay, proceed, and then it starts up again. You making everybody have to prepare for everything you want them to know deeply, and everybody gets a chance to plug in at different times, and you know the kids well enough that you can plug them in. I just worry about this. I don't think we ever addressed sufficiently the notion of how do you really know that Johnny got that when all he did was hear or ask a question to make someone else talk about what they knew about that.
one way you could address that is to have on the grant board kind of patronage thing, you've got, I don't know, would it be 3 or 4 projects? But everybody knows what everyone else is presenting on, and they're all trying to win the prize. They're gonna like make their own persuasive argument with this thing they've researched, but part of the preparation has to be to explain why the other 2 or 3 groups are either, wrong, or why their thing they're doing is so obvious or simplistic. But I also like that idea of switching roles. I mean, pulling them out minute to minute might be hard, but you could have them lay it all out, and then they don't know till day of which team they're going to be on. And they can kind of work around between each other, preparing all these things, learning everything, and then day of.
It's kind of that
like,
notion of when you're in debate teams.
Yeah,
you
that's what I
prepare
was
for both
thinking.
sides.
So it'd be a perfect jigsaw opportunity, because they all, say 4 on the debate team, have to be prepared. They'd have to make sure the whole team is prepared for whatever topic they are pulled, and the depth of their understanding would be easy for us to ascertain if it's teachers versus the debate team. And we do have 2 projects, so one could be the model where they're my mind with word vocab. They're trying to get the funds, right? With these models. The other one could be that they're doing this debate or trial, but they don't know which one they're going to be, and everybody has to be well prepared. Right, so it's almost, you have one tier of preparation where maybe they're in teams for the preparation part too, but they don't know they won't be presenting in teams, they won't be arguing in those teams, they'll be pulled out individually and then assigned which aspect they're going to focus on during the debate, and then they could, but still be gaining points for their team. Does that make sense? Maybe I'm not.
Well, we have multiple objectives here, right? So we can divide what we're doing into these different, two different projects, and in these areas where we're looking at advances in scientific understanding, we could say that in the jigsaw, these different advances in understanding and these different concepts themselves need to be understood, and they could be through the lens of the scientists that actually went through those discoveries. And that the debate then would be, it could be any of those theories that are being debated, but everybody needs to be prepared.
Right.
So are we saying the same thing?
You could have the, you could have like maybe a captain, like a primary team for like each thing, like the scale, and a seasons team, and then, you know, because you have a lot of time, they could present each day or every couple days to the other guys. So here's what we're learning so far. So they're kind of bringing people along, and each group has the responsibility to be primary researchers, but they also have to bring everyone up to speed because no one knows who they're going to be with in the ultimate presentation.
I like that. I feel like I'm not concerned because I feel like just building the scale model and working on the ideas of presenting your case, I feel like I can really get through the whole idea of, you know, what you need to present and how having math back up your argument and all that stuff. I can kind of get through a lot of the key pieces.
The Renaissance in scientific thinking, I think, is going to be awesome. I think what I'd really like in the models themselves is if I'm able to pull in both my math, and I think your math can be pulled in.
Yeah, I do.
I have to make sure I'm really clear on the science so I can understand how to do that accurately. And then also I can pull in a lot of the other Renaissance stuff in models.
And we can do some mixing third core with 7th, 6th if we feel like the 6th graders will benefit at all from the 7th graders. Like if we want to pair them or
Yeah,
team
I think
them.
what I would need to know is that what science here would best correlate with what math here.
Okay, and
So-
I'm happy to make that
You feel
my
like you see that.
focus. I mean, I
Okay.
see it, but I haven't done it in a while, so I mean, I
Okay.
think I can spend some time the next couple of days trying to put that together, and then you and I can meet and see if we're covering everything you want to cover.
That'd be really cool.
They go together though, because you won't understand like tilt and seasonality until you understand the heliocentric thing.
The
Sure.
debate itself doesn't necessarily have to be
In
Renaissance
yeah.
based, but we're saying,
Well, especially if you use this time machine thing or going back
Yeah.
and forth, you could have someone drop in from a
Yeah.
time period. or
each
this.
team has like 3 Renaissance figures and 1 time traveler.
Ooh.
Something.
Time card, lifeline.
that.
Really?
They love
Life?
time travelers. That's awesome. They have Doctor Who and 3.
Oh my god, they love Doctor Who in this.
Those do. And then I would
So
imagine
guys,
if
we
this is
actually have to stop.
Well,
So, but hopefully you guys got useful things. I feel like you guys could stay up all night working on this.
I'm gonna wear this to work tomorrow. So I'm just gonna be here.
So we're gonna wrap it up by doing a debrief of the protocol, and then if you guys, I mean, it's up to you guys whether or not you guys want to stay and continue to talk, or if you want to, postpone it till tomorrow or whenever. But I did want to get us out by 5. So I'll start with you guys. Was this helpful? How did this go for you guys?
Yeah.
Yes.
I feel like I have a much better sense. I feel like last time I was a little overwhelmed after we left that. I thought, I don't know how we're going to do that. But now I feel like it's,
It's like the second
starting
time
to
has
get-
focused it in.
yeah.
It's a team of folks that can really see what it is that we're doing.
Yeah.
I feel like this is good, like we need to just
Thank you.
tie it down, right?
Yeah.
This is
Yeah, we're close, is what I feel like. And I really like the charrette structure. I think it was perfect for this because we could present, hear you all, and then there wasn't that we would just jump in, but there was the space to re-enter and then exit the conversation. And for me, that's really helpful.
Anyone else want to the process.
Well, I like about the charrette that when the discussion's happening, the people that are participating can own it without this pressure on you guys who presented that you have to take anything we said. But you get the opportunity just to be inside of a bunch of other people talking and then pull what you like about it, because it's your unit, or units, or projects.
It's ours.
I like that about the charrette, that there's no pressure, even though it might feel like it. You really don't have to do anything.
I'm not a consistent participant in your guys' discussions at all, but I can't interrupt people. So I felt at certain points like I couldn't get a word in because it's moving too fast, but that's the way that I behave.
But it's really good for information for a facilitator to know that, that we're kind of jumping on and there needs to be space for someone to be the same.
And one on that note, actually, I was just thinking, like, if there were any fewer people or any more people in the room, it might not have worked to the extent that it did.
I also got a sense, and this isn't necessarily specifically about the charrette protocol, but I think this specific instance, I think doing it over at City and then doing it first and then the second time here was like perfect. Because over there we got the outsider views where it was kind of, it totally felt, I don't want to say less efficient, but more kind of like jumbled. Yeah. And then this, we all know how this school works. I think we can all visualize how this is going to roll out a lot better than they necessarily could. So I think that was really awesome to have that kind of outside perspective, and then really once with like the perfect amount of time between, I think, for you guys kind of honing in your ideas a little bit more, coming to us, and then we could really kind of like just nail it.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.